Peláez, CEO of LexLatin. Welcome to our masterclass of today. This is the first masterclass of a series of masterclasses that we have organized to celebrate our 10th anniversary. We will have one class every Tuesday in the month of November, and we look very much forward that you will be joining us in each one of them. Today's masterclass is on compensation in the era of artificial intelligence. All of us, we are very much aware of the impact that artificial intelligence is having in the legal sector, the pressure that law firms have to embrace artificial intelligence and to review their business model based on the different tools that they will implement in their practices. And today's class is precisely to analyze the impact that artificial intelligence has in compensation. For this class, we have one of the best professionals that we could find. His name is Michael Short. Michael is a founder and a principal of LawVision. LawVision is one of the leading consulting firms in the US, and Michael has a lot of experience working with law firms around the world, including Latin America. And nowadays, he is very much concentrated in working with law firms, analyzing the impact of artificial intelligence in the business of law and the impact of the artificial intelligence on the services rendered by the firm, in the talent of the firm, and obviously in the compensation of the firm. With any further delay, I would like to invite Michael to start his presentation. Michael, please go ahead, and thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, Fernando, it's such an honor to be here with you, my friend, and to watch everybody say hello to each other in the chat room as you're signing on from so many countries that I visited with and look forward to coming back to. It's truly an honor to be sitting here with you. And it's truly an honor to be sitting here to talk about such a fascinating topic at such a fascinating time. Right now, even unrelated to the AI influences, there's so much pressure on compensation systems around the world because there's of the multiple generations that are coming into firms at the same time right now in the partnerships, and the silent generation and the boomers. We've got our attitudes, and as you can sort of tell by looking at me and the way the light shines off the top of my head, I'm a boomer. But the older attitudes are shifting, and the older ways of thinking about, just trust us, be patient, pay your dues. The younger generations tend to reject those. But now we've got the influence of AI in all of this. And so the timing of this conversation is perfect. The timing of the opportunity to join you all and spend an hour or so with you is just most welcome. So I will move into my materials right now here. And again, please feel free to go ahead and send questions back in through the chat room. Fernando will monitor those for me and send whichever should come along back into the program. But I'm just going to keep rolling through all of this stuff because an hour feels like or sounds like a lot, but it goes by so very quickly. So just a couple of seconds about my least favorite topic, and that's me. I've been doing this a long time. And the point that I want to really make with all of this, actually 2 points. One, yes, my picture is probably a little old, and I've got a little less hair. But two, the second point from the bottom here is really important to me, and I want to convey this to you. I'm not sitting here saying I am just this incredible AI expert and I'm this amazing predictor of the future, because I'm neither. I'm really good at listening. I'm really good at connecting dots. I'm really good at being curious about things. So right now I've got a wonderful opportunity to share with you my ideas that are based on my curiosities and what I've been hearing in the marketplace and where all this stuff may be going. So that's the most important part for me, for you to take away from this one little page right here, is I can't predict the future, and all of this is about looking into our crystal balls and trying to predict the future. But I would tell you that in legal marketplaces all around the world, it's never been more important to try to create pro forma models into 3, 4, 5 years down the road, to not only account for the investments in AI and what's going to happen with the business model, but also with retirements, with all of the normal pressures that are on your firm right now. So it's impossible to predict the future, but we've really got to try. And now it's never been more important than now to put all of these influences together and try to figure out the impact, the tailored impact on each and every one of your firms. Because nothing here is one size fits all. Nothing is just pull solutions off of the shelf and say, here's what everybody should be doing. It's far from all of that. So our topic today, the wonderful session description here. And there's some lofty words in this brief little paragraph. Transform your vision. How to structure incentives when AI does in minutes what previously took hours. Discover why traditional models are obsolete. And learn the practical strategies for aligning compensation with real value creation. So much is packed into these words, and so much of it is just foreshadowing of where all of this stuff is going, with the most important part being value creation. Because this industry has been built upon models related to the billable hour, related to a revenue generating machine for a century. And we may be at a point where over the next decade, over the next 10 years, it's turned on its head. And I don't want to sound alarmist. I don't want to convey that, oh my gosh, we're going to flip a switch and all of a sudden everything's going to be turned over. Everything happens in an evolutionary path at the industry level as a whole, but then even more importantly, at the appropriate pace of change for each of your firms. So I can't say that something seismic is going to happen in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. Are the pressures going to build? Absolutely. Are the leading developers going to launch their solutions? Well, they already are. And we've got to figure out for each of us, do we want to be at the bleeding edge of investments and really driving this stuff? Do we want to let others make the investments and then follow along in their footsteps? That's where most of the legal industry is, because we're trained to be precedential. We're trained to look backwards and make sure that the risk is minimal. But with respect to innovation and thinking more broadly, now may be a time to look a little bit more, be more aggressive with respect to looking forward rather than backwards, because there's a bright line between how you practice law and how you run your business. And it's time now for more of the business focus to be more forward looking and more down the road as to where all of this stuff is going. A couple of quotes in here, and again, I'm not the expert, so I rely on others who are experts to lead the way and lay the path for me. AI is going to reshape every industry and every job, per LinkedIn. Another quote is, AI is not going to replace individuals, but people. It's not going to replace people, but people who use AI are going to replace people who don't use AI, or various permutations on that quote. And those are true. I mean, think about how many times you use AI, either directly or indirectly, in your job and your daily lives already. It's already being built into the search engines. It's already being built into the tools and the apps that we have. And sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. And there's ethical concerns. We've got to be aware of when these things are operating in and behind the scenes. There's a lot of responsibility that comes along with this, particularly on the practice side of law. But on the business side of law, we've got more free reign in how to do all this stuff. It's more internally focused, and this is where we can really start to look down the future. So I started out by being lazy, and by typing into AI, basically my marching orders here. Here is the search that I put in here. How's AI going to change law firm partnership compensation models? And the answer surprised me a little bit, because in the answer, you can see the precedential look and the influence of the way things have been in our very slow moving and slow evolving industry. AI is expected to significantly influence law firm partnership compensations by challenging the role of the business model, which is deeply embedded in the current partnership structure. Isn't that the truth? When I started consulting in 1988 back at Price Waterhouse, even before it was Cooper's, pre-merger, one of the first monographs that I was asked to read was a monograph called Death of the Billable Hour in 1988. So this is not a new topic. This is not a new conversation. We've been having it for such a long time, but now it's got roots. Now it's got teeth. Now it's got a place to go that's going to be different. But is it deeply embedded in the current partnership structure? Oh my goodness, yes. Most systems, particularly compensation systems, are revenue driven. They're not even profitability driven. People in other industries laugh at the legal industry and say, you guys aren't looking at profitability on a deep basis, on all of these dimensions in your business on a daily basis? You're kidding. But we've been living in a protected cocoon up until, at least in the US, in the big recession, 2008, 2009, which had trickle effects all around. The rate of growth of revenue and profits mirrored each other. And it was reasonably safe to say, we can build systems based on revenue, but we all know that relationship broke. And now clients became much more involved, much more informed, much more strong with respect to, what's happening, how their matters are going to be pushed forward. And the systems are a little bit behind. They're behind the times and all of that. Now, we've got to be very careful, and we'll talk about this as we get deeper into the slides. Profitability data can be the most valuable information that you have. It can also be the stick of dynamite that you light and blow up a very wonderful culture. But we know as an industry how to use it, how to implement it carefully so that it doesn't have the negative consequences, because it can have very negative consequences. But with the advent of AI, with the advent of the changing business model, it's actually never become more important. So there's a parallel rail to this conversation, and you'll see the concept of profitability come up from time to time. And it's to be able to push that concept forward, because it's going to be increasingly important in conjunction with AI. So what's going to happen? The shift toward alternative fee arrangements or fixed fees is being accelerated by AI, that's for sure. But this transition faces resistance. Yeah, again, here's that old guard, that old protective look within the guild that is so pervasive in all of the writing that it comes through in an AI search. Cultural inertia within Big Law. Big Law drives all of these changes. Well, there's a great amount of influence there, but I would suggest that there's even more influence coming from the clients than what we're trying to protect. And the clients are going to drive us to these new models. So the last point, firms that adopt this AI may shift towards models where comp reflects the value delivered rather than the time spent. This is really important, because as you'll see, I view three major phases in the development of this. And the third phase is where the business model has changed. Now we've got to align compensation models with it. But if our compensation models are driven by the historic old revenue only, not even profit-based metrics, there's a gross disconnect here. So value driving under the new model may be dramatically different, and there may be completely different models and roles for partners where all of this is going. And with respect to multi-jurisdictional law firms, you've got some places where they command higher rates, the economy is stronger. But in the new model, you may find that one of your most valuable partners or your most valuable partner may be in a relatively small country with a weak economy, but that person's relative contributions to the new style organization and the new roles put her or him at the very top of the value chain. So it's an interesting time, to say the least. The pace of change is fascinating. I think the transition will be gradual, and the billable hour is likely to persist as an internal performance metric, but the pressures are growing. And I think a key reason for this is on this chart. I think that when you look at who the economic buyers of legal services are, they are still largely boomers or Gen Xers. And I view the Gen Xers as having the same general attitudes as the boomers. And these are people who are very comfortable with the billable hour model, with the old revenue model, with the, let's do it the way we've always done it. I'm comfortable keeping records. I like looking at bills that have hours and rates by the hours so I can see what's going on. But in most data sets around the world, you can see where there is a steady, gradual shift towards the younger generations and away from the boomers and the Xers with respect to who is making the purchasing decisions, who are buying the legal services. And once that majority swing goes to, Xers and then Y, Z, millennials, and further down, I don't know what's going to happen. I think that there will be a much more comfortable shift away from the billable hour model. And I think that there will be much more pressure on firms to deliver either fixed fees for entire matters or for segments. And I think the segment part is really important. You'll see that in a second where we're going in this conversation. So right now, we're protected, but we're protected by the clients who are still comfortable with this model. But even that is shifting on a regular, annual basis as younger people take those economic buyer jobs and move into those seats. So this part's an important influence as well that buys us a little bit of time, but is going to rapidly disappear once the transition really starts to pick up. So let's look at the traditional models and why they are going to become obsolete. What's going to happen with these? This is a chart that I've been carrying around for years and modifying for a long time. And I'm not going to get deep into what happens in each and every one of these steps, but this is a nice continuum of compensation models. And on the x-axis, you can see the difficulty to implement. And this is all very subjective. It's my subjectivity. And on the y-axis is alignment with teamwork and profitability. And teamwork and profitability are highly linked in the law firm business model, in the law firm world, and the delivery of services. So we've got this parity, the system, and it starts off on the left-hand side. Me and Fernando, we decide to open up a two-person practice where 50-50, everything is equal. That's fine. And then we may move into some sort of stock ownership model to where, he's working harder, he's bringing more in, so he gets 2/3, I get 1/3. But then once we start to move out of that model because we're bringing in a third partner, well, who's got to sell it? Who's got to buy it? What's the price? Things get complicated out of there. So then we say, all right, maybe we go to unmanaged lockstep. An important part of this, though, is this is not a step process. You don't go from unmanaged lockstep to a two formula, formula with two variables to a formula with three variables. You move around based on what the firm needs. But in this model, there is absolutely a section in the middle that is about objective formulas. And look, there's many firms where a formula and objectivity are absolutely needed. I bring no biases to all of this. Do I see that the firms that are really pulling away on profitability are at the upper end of all of this, which is where more of the subjective elements are? They are. It's difficult to really promote teamwork. Not impossible, because we've done some interesting things with metrics and some formulas over the past couple of years, but it's difficult to promote a high level of teamwork and collaboration out of the basic formula. It is. Everything focuses around two or three variables. It just sort of stops there. So the subjective elements are where you can get into the higher level of the conversation and say, where's all of this stuff going? But assume for a second now that what I'm thinking is going to happen is true, and that's that a large segment of matters, and look, even the most complicated matters have got elements that are relatively simple, commoditized, they're done by the early associates. And AI starts to influence that. AI starts to take those hours away. As an example, I was recently in the office of a real estate partner, and he said, watch this. And he typed into his little AI tool, give me a financing contract that has these three clauses for this type of real estate transaction. And a document produced very quickly. Within a couple of minutes he had it, and he's looking at it and he goes, this is probably 70-75% done. But in doing this, I lost 3 hours of associate revenue time and associate training time. What am I going to do with that? That's the key puzzle to the business model itself. And that's where I think those parts have got to be, are very susceptible to becoming fixed at some point. And this is why, for as easy as it is on your daily annual operations of your law firm, please keep raising rates, because we have to have those rates at the highest possible level when segments start to freeze, because it's going to be a little bit more difficult to freeze, to move them, to increase them, to escalate them once that's done, though not impossible. The value of the services will continue. But if we're going to replace those hours in the normal revenue stream, it's sort of the logical conclusion that those segments are going to fix. But if they do, then the business model changes and partners are going to be doing different things. And we'll be paying somebody, for example, more for being the key business developer, for the aggregator of information, for the person who keeps our forums, so that the AI engine is unique to our firm and it's based on our knowledge. And that's why it's a value driver. But if we do that, how do you translate that into a formula? That's where an absolute disconnect happens. And that's where this middle section that I chose bright red for a reason, is going to experience a lot of pressure. If the roles and the value drivers of the partners change dramatically and away from those 2 or 3 or 4 variables, that's going to be difficult. But these other segments, the subjective elements that are up in the right-hand side, they're not immune from all of this. And they are still based largely on the same data sets as the objective systems, the formula. But something else is interesting that's happening in here is a lot of people think, oh my gosh, formulas and subjective systems, they're so far apart. Truth of the matter is they're really close. The objective formula, they typically run off of the same data sets as the subjective systems. It's just that the subjective systems at the end of the day can say, you know what, we can make adjustments to this based on what we think is right and what we feel like has to happen for all of this stuff. But all of these systems, if they're based on the traditional models and the traditional data sets, if the data set changes, all of the underpinning foundational elements of all of these options are going to have to be realigned. And that's a big task. That's a huge task. So let's move on to aligning compensation with real value creation. I've already told you where I'm going with all of this thinking, so it's not going to be a surprise to you. There are no big reveals in all of this. But I see 3 big phases happening in all of this. Right now, this is where we are right now. We enhance existing systems and processes. We're kind of learning. Many of your firms, you've got sandboxes in there, and you're learning about how to apply these things carefully. You've got you've got strict rules around how you can use it, the disclosure to clients and when you're using it. That part's important. But the next big piece, and again, these aren't going to happen in big, huge, thuds. They evolve. And even getting to this part, we're probably years away from this, and it'll be packed into a 2 to 3 year evolutionary period. But we're going to get to a place to where the evolution of client services is picking up this fixed fee part, this part that the AI element is really driving into on the practice of law side of things. And then once that's in place, then we've got to align the comp systems with it. And I would be very reticent and afraid to put the comp systems and the evolution ahead of the business model. The comp system evolution is going to be a step behind the business model. And I think it has to be. We've got to see where the business model or where the practice model goes, and what's needed to serve our clients and what are the new roles in all of this, so that we can then determine the value that's attributable and associated with each of those roles. So let's dissect these a little bit. Because if we look at the enhancing existing systems and processes, what's going on? Well, there's a lot that's already happening, sometimes via very complicated models that are now going to be put into apps that are going to apply AI, and you'll be able to have decisions within minutes. As an example, more and more firms are trying to test their results for bias analyses. Are we biased against generations, or is there a bias in our data against genders? And right now, that it takes a lot of regressions. It takes a lot of work to work through those big, huge data sets and reach reasonable conclusions on all that stuff. I know some folks who are already looking at how do I create an app for all of this, so that once you're done with your data, you can say, push the button, and it comes up green, it comes up yellow, it comes up red, and then you can make the adjustments and evaluate what's happened in there. Internal allocation testing against generally accepted norms, real quick modeling. I've got all sorts of axioms and rules that are used by headhunters, by competitors, by market to say, here's roughly how you value a partner. And I think it's a valuable exercise to look within the results of any firm and say, all right, here are the results and the allocations that we've decided. But from a market perspective, what are these folks hearing out in the marketplace? What are, the big firms saying that they would be willing to pay this person? And then you can see the differences between the two. Well, right now, that's an Excel spreadsheet that takes me, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. And are we thinking about turning those sorts of things into apps? Of course, so that you've got real-time information on all this stuff. You can test yourself right away. So these are happening right now. Accelerated profitability reporting, the start of carefully easing this data into the allocation process. And again, please ease into this. You've got to have education. If you're working on profitability and there is a huge focus, or you're hearing a huge focus within your partnership on the allocation of overhead or the methodology, then that's a strong indicator that they don't trust that you're going to use this against them in comp, as opposed to a tool to evaluate their relative profitability and boost profitability together. I think profitability is best used right now for the legal industry. It's best used in the following manner. Everybody has a relative, as a relative profitability level on your book, on the matters that you manage, and that's your baseline. And we can then reward you based on your improvement from your baseline. It's a tailored approach. We're not trying to get everybody to some mythical place in the middle of all of this stuff. But picture within your partnership, all partners educated on profitability and working towards improving their relative profitability by 2 to 3%. Well, the numbers are going to be different from partner to partner, but the overall aggregate result of this is a lot of newfound money in the firm, and that's a wonderful outcome. So the profitability reporting is really kicking up, because even in current compensation work, what we're hearing is you've got 2 partners in offices next to each other, and this partner generates a large amount of money based on 2 associates and a paralegal. This partner generates the exact same amount of money based on 2 income partners and 2 senior associates and 4 paralegals. Should they be paid the same? In many firms, they are. And that's creating a stress on comp systems. So more and more are figuring this part out and saying, no, we've got to accelerate the profitability piece. And that's independent of AI, but it's going to play a very important role in the intersection of AI later on. Sophisticated accounts receivable management tools. My partner, Mark, he's already done some amazing work using an AI engine in behind Excel spreadsheets. To really help early flag on those accounts that require early upkeep and a lot of extra attention. Improved internal quality control over large invoices. For any of you who work with the big insurance companies, I love you big insurance companies, but their billing processes are quite complicated. And now you can build review processes to make sure that all of the time entries are proper, they're properly formatted, or at least they flag, where they are not properly formatted. You look for the accidental duplications, because those are always very embarrassing when they go out. So these are already happening. But also from an external perspective, the market-focused perspective, everybody wants data. Everybody wants data on what the partners of this type and this practice and this, these experiences are doing, and that's very difficult. But there are already some organizations who are looking at this and saying, all right, if we can corner the market on the data via our tools, then you could put in, 4 or 5 criteria. Here are the things that we're looking at. Well, what's going to happen for that type of person? What are the types of numbers that that person's hearing in the marketplace? Now, the ugly old consultant did not just say that this is a race to the bottom on compensation, because each of your firms has a culture, and it's not just about money. And many of your firms have got partners who could make more money elsewhere. So this is more about cross-checking and making sure that those gaps don't get too big. I don't want to come across as just this is all about money and all about numbers, because there's so much magic and so much special in each of your firms that has to come through and carry forward through all of this. But the availability of information is going to grow dramatically. And that's a really important theme here. So this is kind of where we are right now. And based on my experience with that real estate partner who typed in, give me this contract for a commercial lease with these 3 clauses, and it happened, and a whole bunch of time disappeared. Where do we go with this? What can happen? What could happen? Well, right now, when I talk with firms and I ask how much of your work is currently fixed, fixed alternative fee arrangement, we're dabbling our toes in it, 10, 15, some firms get up into the 20% range. And that's all very good, because I think the higher you are right now on that means that you've got a real good understanding of your cost basis and how you're delivering these services. And you've got reliability in your data so that you can actually make these analyses. But as we move over to the right-hand side of this chart, this is where that real estate partner that I was speaking with is having a problem, because a whole bunch of that work, that initial work, that groundwork, the foundational work in this matter moved away. Well, if it moved away, are we counting on a model wherein there's just going to be more work to replace it and we're going to become even more efficient at all of this stuff? I'd like to think not, because you're already quite busy. And you're very busy managing all of these things. But also, if you put all of your eggs in that basket, then you're going to be putting the whole AI revolution on the back burner and saying this part isn't happening. We'll just keep filling the pile. We'll just keep doing things under the old model. So I don't think so. But in doing so, will there be a large segment of work that is moving into a fixed alternative fee arrangement structure? Yeah, there has to be. And I estimated it at about 2/3 here. And the reason I did that is I think that in future billing, there will be a fixed fee element, but there's still always that part where you've got that expert partner who has to look at all of this stuff and apply it to the specific situation at hand. Or that partner who knows the financing people and who knows the government regulations and knows how to put all this stuff together. There's a people part of this that's not going to go away. But again, as the economic buyers of legal services shift to younger people who are more fluent in AI and these questions, they're going to be looking at the bottom part of that right-hand chart and saying, no, that's not hourly work anymore. Do we as an industry have to figure out how to train people in that world? Yes, that's a whole separate conversation for us. Who's going to own law firms in the future? How are we going to train young people if we're going to need fewer of them? This chart is also going to drive that conversation. And again, that's a completely different masterclass for all of this stuff. But what happens as a part of this shift? Well, there's going to be a whole bunch of new capabilities coming along that directly impact the data going into the comp system. And that's what the top section here is all about. New capabilities will influence the traditional comp data structures. And this is about the supporting data structure. Look, if I've got a subjective comp system and my data structure reflects the value of the partners, and I can use that data in whatever environment I'm in, post-AI, pre-AI, at any time, I'm fine. So much of this is particularly on the subjective side, is not as much about the system itself as it is about the data structure and what's flowing in there, because the data structure reflects how you value people. And right now, the value comes from revenue generation in most firms. Profitability is getting there, but it's still lagging along pretty far behind. But think about these new capabilities, enhanced profitability reporting. Now you could, for where this stuff is going, you could say, all right, we're going to shift the allocation of overhead across the different timekeeper categories by this. What happens? And you can do it in Excel, but it's still a little clunky at the moment. You need this all to be fluid and moving back and forth. But you can also look to AI and say, how do we optimize this? What combination of factors creates the greatest level of profitability out of all the different ways that we could look at this? Because at the end of the day, we don't pay ourselves out of revenue, we pay ourselves out of profits. So we need to optimize the profit piece. And that part's incredibly important. So there's great tools coming along those lines. Pricing support and alternative fee arrangement development. How do you quickly mine 30 prior matters that are similar to the one that's coming along? And also, by the way, have confidence in the data and the time records of those prior matters so that you're willing to bet that the next one's going to be good and solid within a reasonable range of risk to put all this stuff together. Right now, it's people sitting there looking at the matters, doing a lot of interviews, but are there tools coming along? Of course there are. Of course there are. Intake support. Think about this. And my partner, Mark, I referenced him once before, Mark Badice, he is deep into these tools and these all profitable and performance elements. He's already created some tools for clients that basically review the client from a creditworthiness perspective, from a, an overall reputational perspective. So that you've got a tool that says, no, we can take this one on, but in order for this client to come in, we need a retainer of this, or we need a billing arrangement of this. So that's going to absolutely help drive your economics with the future intake. But there may be times due to an app where at the intake moment, the app says no. And culturally, are we ready for that? To where, no, for as much as I want these numbers in my column, it's better for me and for the institution to follow the advice of this app and say, no, I actually can't take that client right now. It's too risky. Conflicts, review potential business conflicts in addition to ethical conflicts. Think about that for a second. You put your strategy in an app. You put your key industries in an app. You put the areas that you want to grow in an app. And then from other resources, the app knows who the key players are in those areas and who we should be targeting. So I come along and I've got this wonderful opportunity, came to me from a friend, from a referral for this kind of mid-sized client. They're trying to grow, they're willing to take a bunch of risks. And it clears ethical conflicts. In many firms, I can go with that. But in the future, will there be an additional layer, a strategic layer saying, Mike, you can't take that one. You have to do the right thing for the team because that client or that type of client is likely to conflict us out of something really big in a couple of years. And we have to take the long-term perspective on this. And we've got to be able to serve the really big clients in all of this. And if we become adverse by some short-term reaction, that's not the smart move for us. So please really be careful with this. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And that one's related to the identification of areas supported by strategic growth. You can have an app saying, here are the hot areas for all of this. Here's where we want to go with all of this. These make sense. So these will impact us on an individual basis. AI will be able to flag things that we normally would take to drive numbers in our columns, but that's not going to happen anymore. Market focused, we can quickly compare internal results from any number of systems. Now, picture this. Right now, you've got a formula. And you want to say, well, what would the results be if we ran a 12-tier points table with these criteria? What would the results be if we ran a point grid with these criteria and these levels in it? And you can look at it quickly. And I'm not suspecting, and I don't hope that there is a drive to the middle for all of this, but I will tell you that right now, if you look at sophisticated formulas and subjective systems, they produce kind of the same results. We're looking at the same data, the same foundation is there. So there's not a lot of variances across all of this stuff from the existing data set. Will there be variances in the future? Yes. But again, we have a tendency in an open market to rein in the variances and find market levels for everything. get reliable market data, from a system with dominant share. Can we look to apps and somebody to be your source for comp system data? Yeah. Somebody's going to step into that void. Somebody's going to step into that abyss. It's absolutely going to happen. And when it does, it's going to solve two things. One, the transparency required by the younger generations who say, look, it's not that I don't trust you, my senior partners, but I'm just wired to be more skeptical. And I know visually this is real theater of the mind right now because, I'm old and ugly and bald, but generationally, those attitudes are absolutely coming through. So I want to know what the rules are as a younger partner. And I want to know how predictable this is and how transparent it is, not only for me, but to make sure that other people are following the rules as well. But also with real-time data, think about what happens to lateral recruiting and the speed of those processes and the speed of your ability to run checks on partners. And right now there's apps and people doing it. They're running the checks on the partners for their current client relationships, taxes, a whole bunch of different things, but all of that will be expedited. So the big changes are coming with that fixed fee part, and it's going to be pretty fascinating. But then once that's done, one step behind it, now we're looking at the comp system. So we're saying, what's going to happen here? This is where things are going to get really tricky and really a-traditional with respect to the law firm world. Because think about a world where a big segment, and the chart that I've got in there is like 2/3 of even complicated matters are heavily influenced by AI. And again, I'm not trying to put time frames on this. I'm not that smart. But are they coming for the commoditized levels? Intuitively, they have to. So that part is not there anymore, but we've got fixed fees. So we're still getting paid for that. And we're getting paid for our knowledge and our value that's been built over decades of good, solid work. But now, if the shift of compensation is moving away from just straight revenue production or revenue with the profitability piece, what are the roles that are going to be needed in that model? This is where things get interesting. Of course, we'll need leaders, we'll need strategists, but the strategists are going to be looking at the business of law as well as the practice of law, not only where to do it, what clients to go after, but also how to do it efficiently. We'll need pricing experts, people who really understand this stuff. And they're out there. It's a growing cohort. It's a fascinating group. Project managers, again, there's a large group out there. They're growing, but this is really going to escalate their world. And this is where these roles get to partners. There's a partner in charge of our pricing initiative internally. There's a partner in charge of efficiency, which includes project managers. We've got some partners now who right now, under the old model, they're billing 1,800 hours a year, but they're great business developers. We now need to reward them to bill no more than 500 hours a year and go out and develop business. They are salespeople now. And that's a huge shift, not only in just being comfortable with the word sales, but in assigning specific and dramatically changed roles for people. We need to know somebody, we need to have a partner or partners in charge of aggregating our knowledge and turning it into our own bespoke, unique AI system so that all the knowledge that we've built across the decades and our experiences are reflected in here. We're not drawing from anything that's in public. Our experiences are better than that. And every one of you should have that attitude within your law firms, even as you compete with the others. But you've got to be able to aggregate it and reflect it. That's tricky. That's a fascinating moment. That's a fascinating skill. Tool developers, do we want to have people in our own little innovation lab developing apps, developing tools for us that will improve our efficiency while still protecting that cocoon on the top of each matter, which is that area of bespoke, unique expertise which we have. But if we're going to protect that, we actually need somebody that's focused on the HR model. Where are the future owners going to come from? How are we going to develop talent into that if at the bottom end we need fewer associates because we're relying more on AI? And this is not just a big firm model. This is across the entire spectrum. It's all scalable. But think about that. All of the old metrics, all of the old data pieces are going to be pulled out of this or really shifted at some point. And now we're going to look at individuals and say, how did you help us produce all of our profits? What is your unique contribution to the overall model that has shifted? And how are we going to align our remuneration system with that and with you? So the second point here, the value and focus on efforts and results related to investment time, I think are going to soar dramatically in the future. And this is where you will sit down with a partner and you're sitting down with me, and I'm good at business development. For whatever reason, whenever I go out to the local coffee shop, I come back with business. But under the old model, I know that I was paid for hours, and you've got to convince me to let go and say, Mike, for the good of the whole, for the good of this entire organization, this machine now, we don't want you to bill the hours that you used to. You're still the expert in your world. You'll still get those hours on those matters. You're the go-to person for that. But we need clients, and you're good at that. So we need you to go do that. There's a great quote. I hate quoting competitors in my world, but when it's appropriate, just absolutely have to. David Maister out of Harvard, consultant in our world, said, what you do with your billable time determines your compensation this year, but what you do with your investment time determines your compensation in future years. And in most firms, the investment time, it just sort of vaporizes, it goes away. It's called non-billable. We don't do much with it. Some firms record it, but I think this part's going to become really important because the billable time aspect of all of this stuff is going to come down in theory, and it's going to be replaced with this fixed fee module. And if that's the case, then even David Maister's quote is going to shift in its weighting. And what you do with your billable time determines your compensation this year, along with the systems that you have built. What you do with your investment time will determine your compensation in future years, along with those ongoing investments and how you continue to be different, to differentiate your firm and your services from others in this world. And that's where it's going to be fascinating. But that's the complete disconnect when we reach that point. And again, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I don't know, but I'm thinking about it. And the point of this is to get you thinking about it right now, because we've got to be planning to the future and thinking about all of this stuff as we move forward. That's the important part, because if these roles become important, and I think they're all going to become very important, they don't fit in the current model. They don't fit in the current list of values that we look at all partners, because right now in most firms, with respect to compensation, most, if not all partners, you're on the production line, and you've got mathematical statistics that you need to prove each year. They're different. Hopefully they're tailored for each of you based on what you're doing. But you're all in the basic same mindset. What can be coming is a completely different business model with people playing to their strengths. But now their strengths are not going to be, here's your practice, and you're good at client development, and you're good at all these internal things. There's got to be external things as well, and there's got to be the aggregation and all of this happening, and that's fascinating. Will it feel a little bit more corporate culturally? Yeah. Here's the job description, and here's the role, knowledge aggregator. And it's your job to make sure that all of our forms and all of the information that's in our AI system is most current based on our thinking. And that's a really big challenge, because somebody's got to make sure that we're at the leading edge of all of this. By the same token, you're looking at these things and saying, all right, we got all these new roles. How are we going to value these? And this is where, even on my comment down here, I'll admit I'm getting a little bit lazy on you, because value is often determined by either clients or the marketplace. And if a bunch of firms are now moving into this new model and have these new roles and paying partners for different roles, there will be a moment at the beginning to where we'll transition from where the partners are and kind of keep them on their same trajectory, because that's the safe way to launch people into new roles. But then once other firms start valuing and needing knowledge aggregators, tool developers, these very high level pricing experts, and they find that it's quicker to acquire the talent than it is to develop it on the inside. That's when the competitive marketplace is going to kick in. And that's when we will be able to see the true relative value of each one of these positions as they develop, as they move forward, because some are going to have more competition around them than others. They will. And this value proposition will vary significantly from role to role. And I don't think it's our job in a free market global law firm economy to try to put little stakes in those right now and say, this is how it's going to go. That part's going to evolve naturally. But it's going to be fascinating as you think even about your current partnership right now. Who kind of does these roles and who fits into these roles? And is it sooner rather than later that we start to lean into these and get people prepared for where all of this stuff is going? It's a fascinating time, my friends. It really is. Managing change across these 4 phases is going to be a major challenge. And again, so much about compensation and so much about law firm management, and particularly leadership, is just managing expectations. And I think the sooner that you start to look long-term down the road for all of this and prepare your partners, the better. Not in a gloom and doom way. These are all opportunities. This is the bright new future, and we've got to evolve with it. Years ago, I was checking into a hotel room and there was a little tent card on the pillow. And I typically just toss them aside, but in this case, I picked it up and read it. And it was a quote from Will Rogers, old sort of philosopher / star here, from the cowboy era in the US. And it said, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. And I read it, and I put it in my little computer bag, and I kept that one with me. I don't know if I've still got the card, but I've definitely got the quote, because the quote is most appropriate right now. It may feel good. You may feel comfortable right now, but the reason for change is the sooner you start to lay the foundation for change and why these things have to happen, the better. So then it's not as difficult to overcome the changes and sell people on it later on. And again, I'm not saying that my little evolutionary path here is absolutely right. It's right for me based on what I've heard, but tailor it to your situation so that you can then start to get the partners ready to say, new investments right now, as where we are right now. Yeah, I mean, people are already spending on AI systems, investigating them. Many of you are hoping that the big firms and Thomson Reuters and those big companies will figure all this stuff out for you. And to a large degree, they will. But at some point, you'll have to make the more significant investments. I chose $4 signs here. I don't know if that's right. Maybe it's 3, but I'm just trying to convey the investments are going to ramp up. There will be a time when you'll have to have the tools to stay competitive. And then there's a maintenance mode for all of that. The performance metrics over time across these phases. Right now, we're in that traditional mode. Profitability piece is coming along really fast in that middle section. And we got to watch that, and we've got to develop with it. You can't fight the evolution of profitability, for as difficult as it is, because it's so tied to the future. It's so tied to creating the appropriate profits for the firm in an AI model, in a new model. But also right now, you owe yourself optimal profitability out of everything that you have at the moment. So that part's important. And then later on, the profitability is going to be supported by these new tailored roles and goals at the individual level. So there's a whole new different profitability level there, to where we'll have business units and saying, all right, what's the value of this business unit? And that may be where subjectivity plays a major role. I'm kind of old school with respect to data, and I think that anything can get measured, and you can attribute measures and metrics to anything. But there will be some soft and squishier metrics in the future. What's the economic value to the organization of somebody focusing on project management? How do we dollar for dollar, peso for peso, real for real? How do we tie all that stuff down to a specific area? And so I think the subjectivity and the subjective elements of compensation are going to really take off in the future. Client expectations right now, they're modest. I think they're transformational, and that ties back to the generational shift as the economic buyers of legal services demand AI from us. That part's coming, and then we'll get into a maintenance mode. But then also, as you're putting your storyline together, think of these other threads, and you may not need all of them. You may not need any of them. I'm just putting them out here for your consideration right now as you start to put your storyline together. What's the impact on the business model? What's transformational in the middle? And most everything is transformational because in the middle, because that's when the shift, the real impact of AI shifts from our thinking and the back office to the front office, to direct impact on matters. So new generational pressures building along the lines as well. Yes, because leadership and voting control of your important committees are going to shift over to the younger generations who have different perspectives at the same time as the economic buyers of legal services are shifting. Traditional change resistance, that one's going to be most difficult to manage because every firm has those partners who sit in the back bench of and the back row of meetings and go, what's the problem we're trying to fix? There's nothing broken here. And it's very difficult in an industry where everybody is trained to look backwards to say, we need to look forward now. And we need to push on all of this stuff. The impact of the culture I have is transformation in the middle, but I think this one's really interesting. My take on culture is that each of your firms has a unique culture. And I used to think all cultures were the same. Everybody says collaborative, everybody says teamwork. But to me, your culture is that special glue that keeps a group of people who can go elsewhere on a daily basis and practice in other places. What keeps them coming back? And that part is really important. And I think, and I'm very confident that your core values, your culture, that special glue, that can easily survive these transitions. But you've got to be very careful in making sure that those core values show up, those messages show up in every presentation, every messaging that you have around all of this and where all of this may go. But I would, so I have the impact as transformational in the middle. That's when the pressure is going to be the biggest, but I actually hope that your culture doesn't transform at that point. I hope that you can carry on and adapt your culture into these new models throughout this process. But what about multi-jurisdictional impact? Like some of your firms, you've got offices in multiple jurisdictions, multiple offices in multiple countries. And each one has got its own economic engine. It's got its own billing rate range. It's got its own ability to contribute. What happens in all of this? Well, in the profit allocation right now, some of you operate off of one pot. Some of you are working on a more country-based data structure and looking at it that way, and that's fine. Because some of the variances across countries are dramatic. But as we move forward, can it be one pot, but with fair relativity built across the practices and jurisdictions via the profitability data and the foundation stuff that we're talking about? I actually think it can. And it's related to the next line, which is the source of relativity and contributions. Some of you just go, well, the billing rates kind of determine what happens. In country A, I can charge double what we do in country B. So the revenue generation is different in those two. And I get that. But now, if we're looking organizationally to say, all right, we want to optimize profitability and we can bring something in country A, but the real solution is to do it in country B because that's where the relative profitability or the expense load, the cost load is lower, then we need to be able to move those things around and kind of break out of the jurisdictional look at all of this and say, we're now trying to match up the intake with the support of all of it and do it best based on wherever the organization is. Because on the right-hand side, organizational value is going to come from tailored contributions. So think of this now. You could have in your organization right now a partner who is reasonably paid based on the lower billing rates of a particular jurisdiction. And that's the old model. That's the revenue model approach to this. But that person's value could soar to the top in all of this in the future. That person could be an amazing regional business developer. You get that person out of their lane and something amazing happens. And this is where exciting things can happen. And the organization, the regionalization and the jurisdictions, they can fall to the wayside from all of this. And that's pretty fascinating. So that's where the parochialism, the influence of teamwork and groups, you could see the development of all of this in each one of those lines. So right now, I just offer these for your consideration and where you want to go with all of this stuff. I want to close with this quote because I got to be very mindful and respectful of your time as well. AI will be an integral part of solving the world's biggest problems, but it must be developed in a way that reflects human values. This is that culture piece that comes in. Thank you to the leader, leader of and CEO of Microsoft. This part's really important because our key assets are people. They will always be people, and we're serving people. So we've got to apply the tools in a way and update the systems in a way that still maintains that cultural piece. That's what I want to close with.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael, for your presentation. We have a couple of questions, but before going into those questions, I mean, for me, it is clear that the legal sector, law firms, are facing absolutely important challenges resulting from the artificial intelligence. And something that I keep saying is not that it will have important impact. It is having already.
Yeah.
It is having already. Obviously, certain firms in certain jurisdictions are already working on it. Many other firms in other jurisdictions or in many jurisdictions are not working on this. I am right now in Toronto attending the International Bar Association conference, and I was in a presentation where they presented data about how the firms are facing the impact of artificial intelligence. And it is still surprising that a large number of firms remains doing business as usual. And in the analysis that these consultants did, it was clear that for those firms, if they do not start working on the transformation process, they will not disappear by the end of next year, but they will be left aside. Okay. Yeah. And within your presentation, you did, or you share with us interesting information and interesting data, like the projection that the hourly rate will be reduced to perhaps 30% on the proportion of billing professional services for obvious reasons, because of the impact of the artificial intelligence in rendering services that reduce the time that you invest in the rendering of services. Basing your experience as consultant on these changes, at least with the firms that you are working, which is the percentage of firms that have approached the change on the transformational basis and the moderate?
I would say no more than a third.
More than,
and the conversations are happening. And as we talk about approaching the changes, it's so difficult in the legal industry and in our business model to think beyond our little 365 days. You work hard, you empty out the coffers, and then you do it again. And from an accounting perspective, it's very difficult to set aside investment funds and those sorts of longer term funds needed to look at these things. But we've got to start thinking about it from the capitalization of the firm perspective, from investment of private equity, which is another whole masterclass that you could have on all of these things. The options are out there. And it's becoming fascinating. But you even for the 2/3 who aren't making the hard investments right now, one message that I hope you take from this presentation is start laying the groundwork and the foundation for doing this and getting people ready for it, because Fernando, as you just indicated, it's not if, it's when.
Very good. We have two questions. As you said, we can continue for at least a series of minimum 15 master classes in order to continue analyzing the impact of artificial intelligence in compensation, in billing, etc. But here we have two questions because we are running out of our time.
Right.
Philip Prince, who is a legal analytics consultant and a legal scholar, has raised two questions. So we'll start with the first one. Even if firms move away from billing by the hour and adopt project-based fees, the cost structure of a law firm still depends on how many human hours are paid for salaries. So, unless we fundamentally change how lawyers are compensated internally, isn't time still underlying metric, just hiding behind other labels? In that sense, it is accurate to say that the billable hour dies, or does it just become less visible? Plus, we are also going to pay for other type of new tech-related jobs inside the firm.
On the new tech jobs inside the firm, absolutely. That's the whole new value proposition for this, the whole new economic engine that has to be there. With respect to the billable hour becoming less visible, and I love that terminology. I love how the question was phrased. We're certainly going to phase into a new era with deep roots in the old era, but it's time to really seriously start thinking about letting go. And again, this is not a new conversation. I read the monograph in 1988 when I started in this industry, and I had hair. It was good looking, and that was a long time ago. So this is not a new conversation, but we're not going to do it unless we are forced to do it, and we're going to be forced to do it. To me, the importance of staying within the current business model and getting rates as high as you can under the current business model is vitally important, because when we start to fix fees and jump over into the disconnected part of the new world, I'm not a big fan of all of a sudden having our revenue plummet and our profits plummet. That would be chaos. That would be anarchy. So we have to fix the revenue stream, And the analogy that I use is it's somewhat similar to when you take your car in to get repaired at the service center. Here's what I need. They open up a little, book, or, look on screen. Here is, according to the system, how much it costs. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So that mentality, I think, is going to carry forward into the legal industry, but we've got to fix that part. Otherwise, the revenue drops and the model really suffers. So it's where we've got to get our clients, we've got to get the buying population ready to move along with this as well. You're still getting those services based on our value proposition, but it's being delivered via a different engine here back in the back office. But with respect to the number of people who are tied to that, I think that disconnect is happening. It's a little bit later in the timeline for all of this stuff. That's when it's sort of the third phase, when you have those new roles happening, and we can support the client services, and we can support the generation of the revenue for 2/3, and it's just a number that I'm using out of a machine that is not dependent upon the people, and it's disconnected from the people.
Very good. I'm going to raise another question, not from Philip, his second, but Miguel Romer from Argentina asked, do you consider that we need different partners being expert in each of those skills, or all of them improving in that capabilities?
Oh, what's a great question. I think that further down in the evolution, there will be partners assigned to those tasks. responsible for those tasks. They may bring other partners into it. But think about, for example, knowledge aggregation. Everybody's got to be good at it, but if all partners are equally good at it and nobody's responsible for it, something's going to fall through the cracks. Somebody's got to be responsible for it. There will be a partner in charge of a little, maybe a little business unit called knowledge aggregation, or, knowledge management within the firm. It's that person's responsibility to go and make sure that each of the best forms and the best knowledge of the firm is at clients' fingertips at that particular point. So I think there will be more differentiation. But I also think even right now in comp systems, and I'm seeing this, there is much more of a play towards getting everybody off the straight production line and saying, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You do better when you're playing to your strengths. Where you go, Fernando, every time you go out, you develop clients, we need you to go out. Mike, every client that you bring in, they've got a 33% realization rate and half of your clients sue us. Please don't develop clients. Now we're getting someplace. Now I can, my hours expectation is higher and I'm aligned with you and you can go do what you're doing. So I'm already pushing that theme for the non-billable, for the investment time services to get people into their lanes. But I think it's going to be much more distinct further on down in the evolution of all of this. I do.
Very good. We have the last question, and I apologize for those that will be no answer at this time. Alex Perez asks, with the implementation of artificial intelligence in business processes within law firms, could it be considered that firms will have fewer personnel compared to information systems? Should manual work be prioritized, example, achieving mostly in-person work for clients?
Wow, there's so much. What a great question, Ash. There's so much packed into that stuff. The impact of all of this stuff on the business side of the house is going to be fascinating. Do we become more efficient and less reliant upon people just in the daily normal operations of the firm? Sure, probably. There's already firms that are just trying to aggregate, change the ratio of lawyers per legal assistant. And will this make them more efficient and more concierges of work to make sure that they can support more people? Absolutely. Give me the second part of that question again, please, Fernando.
Yes, let me bring it back. Should manual work be prioritized, example, achieving mostly in-person work for clients?
At the end of the day, and then this is perhaps a little bit tied to the client or the quote that I have at the end. One thing that's never going to happen, or one thing that's always going to stay the same within this business model, is it's still people at its upper level. And it's a relationship business. A big part of the engine is going to change, but when it comes to a client with a problem and a lawyer with a solution, that interpersonal piece is so vital that can't go away. I can't foresee that ever going away. The nature of it will go away. I'm fascinated by, are the expectations of clients going to shift as the clients become younger generation?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that, but still, it's two people who have to talk through a problem. And that part, I don't think will ever go away. And sincerely, I hope it never goes away.
Very good. Well, as everything in life, we have come to an end of an interesting masterclass. And I'm sure, Michael, that this is the first of a series of masterclass that I would love to have with you on such interesting and complex question. And I think it's so important for law firms to have a clear understanding of the evolution, because things are changing every single day. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation. It has been a fascinating discussion, and we look forward to have you again sooner than later. And I invite all the participants to fill the survey, because that will help us very much to continue with this series of masterclasses. Michael, once again, thank you very much.
Fernando, it's an honor. Congratulations on your 10 years and your anniversary. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Y a todos ustedes, muchas gracias por habernos acompañado y agradecemos el que nos respondan la encuesta que tienen enfrente de ustedes. Hasta la próxima.